Coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast. Funnily enough, a friend of mine sent a photograph of somebody wearing a Tom t-shirt on a beach somewhere.
Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guest gossip and stories from our studio at GB News here in the heart of Westminster. Later in this podcast, we'll be speaking to Lord Frost, David Frost, and asking him if it's time that the Tory party and Reform came together and formed a single voice for the right of politics in this country. And if so, how would it happen? But first, it's been a big week in international news with Donald Trump sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. The geopolitical situation is in flux. In the UK, we are fretting, as we always do, about the US-UK special relationship. But globally, relations between the two big powers is dominating the conversation. That's the US and China. One of the dozens of executive orders signed by Donald Trump in the past few days was the introduction of tariffs on China from February the 1st. And a deal for Elon Musk, the world's richest man, to take over TikTok could be in the offing. And here in the UK, the Labour government is increasingly reaching out to Beijing in search of deals to drive sluggish economic growth at home. With me to discuss that, as well as how Labour is doing, and Kemi Badenoch's first months in charge of the Tory party, is a former Conservative Security Minister, Tom Tugendhat, in his first podcast appearance with us since losing out to Kemi Badenoch in the Tory leadership race. Tom Tugendhat, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
It's great to be back.
It's great, and you have the same
really
seat
nice seat
as you were in August. Haven't changed. You look as happier than ever.
I'm certainly more relaxed, I'll tell you that much.
You certainly are. How is the special relationship right now, the Trump-Starmer axis?
Look, it's at a professional level, it's strong, right? I mean, and those who try to split us apart are speaking rubbish. I mean, the relationship that we have between each other is extremely close. I mean, there are senators, funnily enough, in the US Senate today I served in combat with in Afghanistan or in Iraq. Yeah. There are congressmen likewise. You know, there are...
so it trickles down below the principal.
Oh, yeah. No, the relationship between Number 10 and the White House is, of course, really important. Nobody questions that. But the reality is, the reason it's special is because it's not a political deal, it's a people-to-people deal. And this is a relationship that is incredibly close on intelligence, on military, on business. You know, we're each other's biggest investors, and we have the level of partnership that others can only dream of. And so the special relationship is absolutely fine. That's not a question. Do I think that Keir Starmer and Donald Trump are natural bedfellows? I think that's pretty easy to answer. I don't think they are. But, you know,
But previously, that's been overcome. Blair and Bush, of course.
Exactly.
Cameron and Obama, different sides of the political fence.
Exactly right. And you know, I'm a patriot. I want Britain to succeed. I want our Prime Minister to have a strong relationship with the United States President. I want our ambassador to have really strong access. Karen,
and that should be Lord Mandelson, should it?
That's the name that Keir Starmer's chosen. He's got to choose somebody who represents him and his administration. Now, I happen to think Karen Pierce was absolutely exceptional. I think she did a fantastic job. If Keir Starmer thinks that Peter Mandelson represents him best...
Do you think he does? Well, is he a good choice?
Look, I'll tell you something about Peter. He's an amazing political operator, right? So you don't need me to tell you this. This is a guy who has rebuilt relationships after he's murdered political colleagues in new and interesting ways, and yet he's managed to rebuild relationships. So if anybody can rebuild or reawaken a corpse, it's Peter. You know, let's see what he does. Yep. But Keir Starmer's got to have somebody who represents him. I mean, that's the point of an ambassador, right? You know, I couldn't do it. I don't represent Keir Starmer's views. I don't agree with most of them, so I couldn't do it. You know, he needs somebody who represents him.
But appointing Mandelson a political appointment, the first one in 3 decades, indicates, doesn't it, the difference that Trump offers in that relationship. Well, he's a difficult customer.
Yeah, sure, it does. It absolutely does. But it also demonstrates the importance of the relationship. You know, Peter Mandelson, you know, whatever you think of him, and you and I will have strong views in many directions, he is a political operator. And you know, Washington, as you know, is a political town.
And you were there last week.
I was there last week for, you know, I go every now and again, and I was there for dinner with a few friends in the Senate, the Congress, and some people who joining the incoming administration, just to talk to colleagues.
We are important to them, are we? I think often we can overblow that relationship because of we're British, but are we less important? Or perhaps we are back to being more important. I think the Churchill bus is back in the Oval Office, isn't it?
Look, there's a huge affection, right? I mean, there's a massive affection, and you don't need me to tell you this. Donald Trump's affection for the United Kingdom, for Scotland, is very strong. He's made it extremely plain. He's pro-British in many different ways. So yes, that's important. Do we have to do more? Do we have to invest more in defence? God, yes. Do we have to make sure our economy is growing again? Yes, absolutely. Do we have to be honest about our relationship with China? And in contrast to what we're seeing at the moment out of Starmer's administration, yeah, we do. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a sort of a natural response. Friends of ours, really close friends of ours, in fact, friends of mine, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Mike Waltz is National Security Advisor. These are really important players who are
who get us.
Who not only who get us, but who many of us know. Mike's been in Congress now for 5 years. I think he was elected about 5 years ago. Took a seat in I think he was elected in 18 and took a seat in 19. And he's he's an exceptional congressman. He's a very, very good friend of many of us in Parliament. Marco Rubio has been a really important partner on IPAC, leading the debate.
On China.
On China.
We'll come to that in a second.
Yeah. So these are friends.
Okay. Why was Boris Johnson, do you think, in the rotunda? And why not? Why was Nigel Farage not in the rotunda? That's the actual physically witnessing the moment of being sworn in.
Well, I think President Trump can choose who he wants. Now, obviously, the numbers
he chose. Then
I'm told that it was a personal decision by the president. Yeah.
So what's that mean for Nigel Farage if he's the person?
Well, I mean, you'll have to ask others on that, but it is very clear to me that that was a personal choice by the president, choosing people who he was close to be around him on the day. And I was told by members of the administration, in fact, one person who, forgive me, but I won't name, who's particularly close to the team, who that it was, it wasn't a large list. There's not that many people can fit in there, and the president went through the list personally and removed some names and added others.
I wonder if Johnson should be part of the conversation now for this government talking to Trump.
Well, Boris Johnson is many things, but one thing he is he's absolutely committed to the US relationship. As you know,
he's American. He was American.
He was American. I think he gave up his citizenship, but I may be wrong on that. Forgive me.
Yeah.
But he certainly was born in the United States. And he has had a very good working relationship with Donald Trump. He's got a lot of friends in Washington. He's got a voice that reaches parts that other politicians don't reach.
Both in the UK and globally.
Exactly right. He's got a brand the like of which very, very few others can match. And so, I'm sure that Boris will be playing his role in building that relationship. This is a bridge that needs to work, and I don't care which side of the fence you're on, making sure that the relationship between
for
all of us, it's important.
Given all that and the importance of the links, the Anglophile nature of some of the people in the regime, are you worried about tariffs on UK goods?
Look, I don't agree with Donald Trump on tariffs. I happen to think that tariffs are not a good way of raising tax. Effectively, they're a tax on your own people.
We're an ally. Why tariff us up?
Well, don't forget, tariffs are a tax on the American people, not on us, right? And
to support local manufacturing or local services.
And I understand what the ambition is, and I think it's something that we haven't taken seriously enough ourselves, the need to defend manufacturing, the need to grow manufacturing at home. We can't just be an export society. I wrote in the Telegraph about this only the other day. We can't just be selling off our businesses and pretending like it doesn't matter that we don't make anything at home. That's really not the answer. So I understand entirely what President Trump's talking about. I just don't think tariffs are the way to achieve it. Now, let's see what he decides to do, right? Because I think the importance, and you've heard this before, but the importance with President Trump is to take what he says seriously, but not literally. And what he's seriously talking about is defending US manufacturing. Exactly how he achieves that, let's see.
Well, let's see what he will do, which is tariffs on China from February the 1st. Is that a worry for our country, our economy?
Look, I think one of the things that we've seen in the last decade, 2 decades, is the move of manufacturing to China for a whole series of reasons, one of which is, of course, cost of labour and the cost of manufacturing. But actually, a lot of that's down to some of the things we've done to ourselves. Look at the policies that we have done to ourselves that mean that the cost of energy in the UK is many, many times more expensive than China, more expensive even than France, and many times more expensive.
Despite the interconnector, meant to have the same price as the continent.
Exactly right. And what Ed Miliband's doing is only going to make power more expensive. So the reality is what we've got to do is we've got to make sure we're making ourselves more competitive. And that's hugely important. And so, we've got to bring back manufacturing from China because that's not the right answer. First of all, there's the human rights violations that we know about. Secondly, there's the offshoring of jobs, which is utterly unacceptable. And third, there's resilience. You remember COVID, and you remember how dependent we found ourselves on real squeeze point manufacturing. Masks, gowns, whatever it was. In China, we've got to get away from that. And so I respect entirely what
why he's doing it.
I completely get that, and I share his ambition. I'm not sure I share the tactics.
Just on China, we're now reaching out to China as a government, aren't we? David Ammey's been there, Rachel Reeves has been there. It might be a repeat visit back in the UK, and we're probably waiting for a Starmer trip to Beijing at some point in the future. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Look, I think that what this government is trying to do is to make a bet on 2010 coming back again. No.
I was there. I flew with Osborne and Cameron to Shanghai.
But they made a reasonable bet.
13 or 14.
Let's not forget, they made a bet that after Deng Xiaoping and then Jiang Zemin and then Hu Jintao, there was a line of openness, right? The world was opening up, China was opening up, joined the WHO, liberalising the economy, more investment.
We took on faith. Were we too trusting then, do you think?
Well, no. That was where China was going. In 2013, Xi Jinping came in, and there was a big change. And what this government is doing is it's ignoring that change. Now, don't listen to me. Listen to Kevin Rudd, the ambassador, Australian ambassador to the US and former Prime Minister. He's just written a fantastic book on this called On Xi Jinping, which lays out very clearly that what we're seeing out of China today is not Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao's openness. It's a complete change. It's Marxist nationalism. It's a real closing off of the industry. It's a real reassertion of Chinese power in a very different way. And they're making a bet on that. Now, they're making a bet on that at a time when, frankly, Chinese demographics are going the wrong way, at a time when Chinese economy is going the wrong way. It's a really strange bet to be making.
As a former security minister, why is TikTok a worry?
Well, it's a worry not just because it collects information on everything you do. If you read through the permissions on your phone, you will find that it knows exactly where you are at any time.
A named person, not anonymised.
Named person, where you are, what else you're looking at on your phone. It can read everything that you're doing on your phone.
Nice. My wife's shopping list.
Well, it may not be less interested in that, than by who your contacts are.
Of course.
And it may be interested in who it's trying to influence in different ways. But secondly, it is a form of propaganda. Now, it's not just me saying this. Look at what is happening on some of these channels now. Now, it's certainly true that Meta, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, Twitter and others, they respond in various different ways. But you know why they're doing it, right? They're selling advertising, they're selling eyeballs effectively, they're selling attention. TikTok doesn't move in line with the others. Now, either it's developed some extraordinary metrics that are so much more effective than everybody else's, or perhaps, just perhaps, the code that's written in Shenzhen by the Chinese programmers is under the influence of somebody else.
So you haven't lost your concern about the TikTok going forward? Okay. They would say, of course, that the Chinese government has nothing to do with their business.
They would say that, wouldn't they?
Well, they do. Just looking briefly back to matters here, who do you think is to blame for the missed attempts to stop Axel Rudakubana, the Southport killer?
Look, I think I'm not going to predict at the moment because there's a huge amount that we need to find out on that. I am really, really concerned that we've got to the point where some very clear warnings were missed. But I've got to put it in context, and that's...
Well, let's speak about on those warnings, three times alerted to prevent officials between 2019, 2021. You were security minister.
I was, yeah.
2022, 24. So that was before you became in post. Do you understand why they were missed? I mean, you get so many warnings in, don't you? In that role?
This is my concern. The volume of warnings we're getting is very, very high. Now, it can be many warnings to prevent, not only per week but per day sometimes. And so it's wrong to blame. If you see what I mean, when you've got a volume like that, it's very hard to work out which ones are serious and which ones are just, noise, if you like. And so we've got to find a better way to do this. Now, this is where, we did some work on Prevent. In fact, I pay huge tribute to Sir William Shawcross, who did a fantastic job on that. But there is more
on the faults. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg was targeted.
It's not quite right. It was
a tweet.
That's not quite right. It was somebody claimed that he would be. It was a claim. No, it wasn't. It wasn't the Prevent itself.
But the Shawcross report looked at the weaknesses of Prevent.
Correct, and I think it made some really important recommendations. We introduced as many as we could in the time available, and as you may remember, the election came a little bit sooner than I was expecting or would have liked. But there's more to do there, because the truth is we need to make sure that Prevent is actually a way of filtering so that the intelligence services, the police, the social security, social services, whoever it might be, can intervene at the appropriate level early enough.
Is it fit for purpose?
Bits.
Would you scrap it?
No, I wouldn't. I would improve it.
By?
Well, but this is where I would look at the Shawcross report, and there's a huge amount in there that we were able to get done, and there's bits that we weren't able to get done because they take time to introduce. And part of it is about making sure you're triaging properly. So you're getting stuff in line in the appropriate way and you're responding appropriately. Because I'm afraid, I think there has been, by some people, there has been an attempt to balance these things. You know, we've got to be frank. You know, where the violence is coming from, the Islamist terrorism that we're seeing is really serious. Yes, of course, there's far-right terrorism. Yes, of course, there's so-called incel, you know, loner terrorism. This is why we need the inquiry.
We'll find out in the inquiry.
Well, exactly
I get it. Okay. Is criticising knife sales by Amazon a distraction? I mean, there are knives in kitchen drawers around the country.
Yeah, look, you know, we're never going to ban knives, right?
No.
That's never going to happen. So we need to get better at identifying triggers, as it were, on people, and when people have radicalised themselves or been radicalised, to find out where we're going. That's why the Prevent aspect is so important.
And the two checks we want to do: look at passports and further date of birth checks. Is there enough? I mean, I know you guys tightened it, didn't you, as a Tory government, and more tightenings.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is one of those things where many of us tried to tighten it in various different ways, and you'll understand why. But different voices were concerned about tourism or business investment or whatever. My focus was always on security, as you would expect. But the government couldn't always.
And the government can't say that another Axel Rudakubana won't happen again. That's the problem. It's always.
You can never say that, which is why you need to make sure Prevent is working.
The issue of
by the way, let's just be clear: the work that counterterrorism police and the security service do is phenomenal. I mean, the number of incidents that you've never heard of, that when I was security minister, I used to hear about daily and weekly, that, you know, the dog that didn't bark, if you like, was sadly much greater than you would imagine. And it wasn't always Islamist. Sometimes it was far right. Sometimes it was, you know, the range of people who radicalise themselves and who we intervene with early, you know, we raid a home or arrest them on the way and therefore deal with very quickly, is actually larger than you may expect. So while of course I'm critical on this, I don't want people to think that we're not taking this,
because you know how hard it is.
It is really difficult.
We don't know his aims, do we? We know who's looking at the information.
Right. I mean, it's a call by the counterterrorism police. They make the call based on criteria that are well set out. And I'm afraid I think Keir Starmer's being a bit tricksy lawyery about it. I think leave the CTP to make the call. They're the experts.
Okay. Just finally, where we are now with your old party, this could have been Rishi Sunak's last weekend as Prime Minister. He could have stayed in power till next week. I think it's January the 28th.
Well,
you would have 6 more months in post. That's 4 times a Liz Truss premiership.
Well, we'd have got.
It was given away.
I tell you what, we'd have got the first scheme in, the foreign influence registration scheme. We'd have got China on the enhanced list. There's a hell of a lot of things I'd have got done. But anyway,
have you found out why I call the election yet?
No, I haven't.
Waiting for the book on that.
Yeah.
You, of course, ran for leadership. What did you learn about yourself?
I really enjoyed it, actually.
You don't regret it?
No, I don't. I really enjoyed it. I tell you what I really enjoyed. One of the things that, I mean, you know this, one of the things that you find in a political party is you can be very Westminster focused, right? You can be very sort of, you know, who's up, who's down.
And we try not to be at GB.
I know you do. I know.
Really
but which is why I like the station, right? Because you actually get out. But one of the great things about the leadership, I went to, 200 different events around the country. You know, I spoke at events in Scotland and Manchester and Doncaster and where, I mean, all over the place.
But what you learn about yourself there, how did it change you? I know what you did. Well, how did it change you?
How did it change me? It made me, do you know what? It made me more passionate about this country. It made me realise even more the strengths that we've got. I mean, you go to a community you go to some place in, I don't know, Scotland or northeast or whatever, and it looks, it looks like it does from the outside, if you see what I mean, as though you're passing by. And then you go in and you meet people who are doing the most extraordinary things. They're starting businesses, they're, protecting them, the heritage of their area.
There's lots to be proud about. I mean,
huge amounts to be proud
focus
about.
on negativity, there's
Right.
dreadful Southport killings and China's risk, but there is a lot to be
It's
happy.
a remarkable. I mean, genuinely, this is a remarkable country. This is genuinely an island of freedom, an island of hope, an island of opportunity. And I know there's a lot of things going wrong, and I know that
exactly.
Keir Starmer's dreadful, and Rachel Reeve's budget is punishing, and all the rest of it. Of course, that's true. Of course, it's true.
That's what you would say. It's what you would say.
But we both know it's true. But
that's what you would say.
But this is an extraordinary country. Just look at people starting businesses. Look at the quality of education. Look at the amazing sense of ideas and hope and opportunity. You see it across the UK.
So it reconnected you to why you're proud of this country.
Yeah, it did. And funny enough, actually, it was a bit like being back in the army, because the last time I've had this connection with people from across the UK is when you're forced into a unit, when you're in a unit with people you didn't choose, and you're working with people who are from the whole of the UK, and you learn about their lives. Of course you do, because you're working together very closely.
The most important question, of course, is what's happened to the Tugendhat tat.
Oh, well, I'm really sorry. I don't know. I think they were. You and your friends were like gannets at the conference. It was all disappeared.
Is there a garage full of tat?
No, there isn't. I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Where's it all gone?
I don't know.
Do you still see people wearing it? I mean,
funnily enough, I did. A friend of mine sent a photograph of somebody wearing a Tom T-shirt on a beach somewhere. And I've no idea who that person was. So if you are listening, if you're still wearing a Tom T-shirt, I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Might need it again. Let's wait and see on that. Just very finally, the threat of Farage, how would you deal with that? He's eating away at the support for the Tory party. He has momentum in our language, doesn't he?
Well, what he's doing is he's communicating problems very effectively. And, there are very few people in politics who are as effective a communicator.
And how would you respond to that if you're
we've
leading the
got
party?
to offer solutions, right? I mean, Nigel has been brilliant over the years, absolutely brilliant at identifying problems. The real problem is that the state isn't working. We have a broken civil service that is not able to deliver the complex change. Where are the answers on artificial intelligence that speed up service? Where are the answers on reforming the NHS that speed up care? Alison Pearson's done an amazing job at listing many challenges to the NHS. Where are you going to get that drive for change, that energy of ideas? Where's that all coming from? That's got to come from reform, real reform of the civil service.
Not the Reform Party.
No, because they're not offering it. What they're offering is a criticism. That's fine. It's important. I get it and I respect it.
Yep.
But that's not the same as the ideas.
Is it time that the Tories and Reform merge to give one voice from the right?
Look, I mean, Nigel's been...
Yes or no?
No, I don't think so, because Nigel's been really clear that his ambition is to destroy the Conservative Party. Now, I look at the last 200 years of the United Kingdom, and I see that every time that the Conservative Party has come to a moment like this, it has reinvented itself, and it has been that agent of change. It has been that thing that reinvented the state, reformed, genuinely reformed the way this country works, and gave us a new lease of life. Now, I think that's what Kemi's doing now. That's the work that she's preparing, and I'm hugely supportive.
You're a big supporter, yeah.
Yeah, I am a big supporter.
Could you stay in a Reform Tory party? You probably couldn't, could you, given your politics?
Look, I don't think it's going to happen, so I don't think it's a question.
You're on the backbenches now, just finally. What's next for Tom Tugendhat? You really are.
Yeah.
What's next for you? Do you want to be...
Chris, I can recommend freedom. I'm just saying. Look, I am really, really enjoying having the opportunity to talk about things that I think matter. Now, you've heard me talking in recent days about the way I think we've got China wrong. You've heard me just there talking about where I think we need to see really serious reform of the civil service, which is broken. You've heard me pointing out the fact that we've got some of the most expensive energy in the world in this country. It's a disaster for manufacturing. It's a real problem for homes and families across the whole of the United Kingdom. I want to be out there making these arguments because these are the arguments that matter to all of us. And I want Britain to succeed. The Britain that I love, the Britain that I served, and the Britain that I saw in the leadership contest is a Britain that can really reinvent this world in a new and interesting way, and with partners in the United States, with partners around the world, so much.
One final question for the guy on the beach in your T-shirt. Will you run again for leadership?
No, but I do like seeing the T-shirt. So no, I'm not. I'm done. I'm done. I'm supporting Kemi. I think she's a star.
And we're done too. Tom Tugendhat, thank you for joining us today on Chopper's Political Podcast. Great to see you. Thanks,
Chopper. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you.
My next guest on the podcast is Lord Frost, David Frost, the former Brexit minister in Boris Johnson's government. Lord Frost, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast. You're a great thinker of the right of politics is going through a bit of a reorganisation at the moment, you might think. It seems to me that Reform UK have the momentum. The Conservatives haven't. I mean, the polls suggest that. The polls show the Tories falling back. Nigel Farage's party surging forward in polls at least. Which party do you think represents the right at the moment?
Well, I guess they both represent the right in different ways. There's a very big spectrum in the Conservative Party. Obviously, Reform parties may be a bit more sort of focused on traditional right politics. But the question is, how do we, get the party structure into an election-winning
The Tory party structure?
Well, the political structure that's arisen of two parties on the right, you don't win elections when the right is divided.
Broadly in the same place, aren't they? That's the point. I mean, how would you deal with the threat of Farage?
So I think if we get to the general election, which is a long way off yet, and the right is still divided, we've got a big, big problem. Yes. Therefore, that problem needs to be solved at that point. Now, intellectually...
Or by that point.
Now, intellectually, that means either one or other party's got to come out on top, or there has to be a pact stroke merger of some kind. Now, that is true then. It doesn't need to be true now. And I can see some advantages in, real competition between the two parties and competing for a convincing sort of right-wing prospectus and sharpening up the offer in that way. So I think there's some evidence that's kind of beginning to happen. And certainly one has to say Reform has got the momentum at the moment. They're arguably slightly ahead of the Tories in the polls. And, the Tory party's in a street fight. It's got to get serious.
But you don't look at Reform. I don't look at Reform and think there are enough people in there to run a government. No. I just don't see strength and depth. I see a very strong leader in Nigel Farage. You see 4 other MPs. And who else is there? I mean, who is going to be the Culture Secretary in Reform? Who is credible? The Tories have a credible cast list, don't they?
If there's an election tomorrow, Reform don't have the people. That's obvious. They're still building the party structure. They don't have the names. They don't have the experience. What they do have is focus and clarity. And in a way, the Conservative Party's got the reverse problem. It's got a lot of people who have experience. And, you look back at the last 14 years and, that's as much a disadvantage as an advantage, arguably, in the political marketplace. But it doesn't have sharpness. And that's the difficulty, I think. And that's why so many people are looking away from the Conservatives and looking for something a bit clearer. And that's we've got to be honest about that ourselves.
Is a merger inevitable between the Reform and the Conservative Party pre-election?
I think, no, I don't think it is inevitable. I think it's possible that one or other party could come out on top and get a decisive lead, and then politics has to accommodate to that. If it doesn't happen, then there's got to be some sort of arrangement or whatever, because we can't allow Labour to win again on a third of the vote.
No. Have talks started yet? Are talks starting? Are they going on between any Reform people and Conservative people?
I'm not privy to the calculations of the leadership of the Conservative Party, and I haven't spoken to them for some time.
What do you know also in your world?
In my experience, Conservatives talk to Reform people all the time, and therefore the reverse is true as well, because we're by and large trying to achieve the same sort of things, and that doesn't mean we take it into politics in the same way. But I certainly talk to people from both sides. I'm quite honest about that, because that's, we're trying to achieve the same things.
Last week I asked the leader, Kevin Badenoch, this question. The polls have Reform ahead of you in the polls. You're going backwards according to YouGov this week. Why have you allowed Nigel Farage to make all the running, become the voice of the right, as he seems to be at the moment? And can you answer yes or no? Will the Tories and Reform UK merge to beat Labour before the next election?
Thank you, Chris, for your wonderful question. So first of all, I will start by saying that Nigel Farage says he wants to destroy the Conservative Party. Why on earth would we merge with that? Policies without plans are just announcements. What the Labour Party has been doing, what Reform is doing, is making announcements. We did that as well, and people didn't like it. How well did net zero work? That was the policy. Where was the plan? So what I'm saying is that we're not going to start making promises without plans, not just going on TV and saying what we would like to do. That is not serious.
So that's what Kemi Badenoch said. She won't do it because Farage has wished destruction on the Tory party. Is that not the problem? You've got these remarks by Farage in the past. He doesn't like the Tory party much. What's in it for them if they're on the ascendant?
Well, that's exactly the problem. And of course, Farage would no doubt himself say that the Conservative Party wants to destroy reform, and that's the reality of the situation we're in. I think, the political tactics are one thing, the political approach is another. And I personally don't think it's right to rubbish, for Conservatives to rubbish reform figures, or even more so people who voted for reform. And I don't think it's particularly wise for reform to do that either. We need to be building agreement and understanding between each other, not digging the trench even deeper. And there's some signs that's happening, and I don't particularly feel comfortable with it, I must say.
I mean, ego's getting in the way, I think, in the top of these things. They always do in any merger of a company or a part or two parties. But perhaps the bigger issue for the Tory party and the right is beating Labour. At some point, that's got to be more important than egos. Between leaders.
Totally. I mean, egos always count in these things. You're absolutely right. Of course they do. But, egos count because the egos want to succeed in politics and achieve something and so on. And therefore, in the end, they've got to try and subordinate those egos to the bigger cause of booting out Labour. And as I say, there are different ways of doing that. And I don't know who or how it's going to prevail.
But the detail might be the problem. The detail, for example, reform want to slash spending by a few percent. That's a great goal, but can it be even delivered? They want to do one in, one out, net zero migration, something which Robert Jenrick wanted. Kemi Badenoch wouldn't commit to a figure, but although she admits she wants to bring it down, of course. But maybe the bigger issue is sovereignty again, back to the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. Reform want to leave that. Kemi Badenoch says we may do that if it's necessary. I mean, there's a middle ground maybe, but maybe the detail may mean it can't happen.
I mean, in the end, these things have got to be settled because we've got to go into the election. The right has got to go into an election with a clear set of policies. It's no good saying, we'll keep thinking about the ECHR, or we're not sure about spending cuts or taxation or whatever. I mean, that was very much the problem at the last election, that it wasn't clear. We've got to be clear, therefore those things have to be settled. They have to be settled within the Conservative Party as well as between Conservatives and Reform if we're going to succeed. And as I say, maybe that will be achieved by one party winning out over the other, or maybe it will be through some sort of deal, and it's too soon to be sure yet, I think. But
you say people talk Tories talk to Reform and the vice versa. Is any talking happening about how a merger might take place? Is there a blueprint somewhere I didn't know about?
I mean, I'm not aware of it, if so, and I wouldn't necessarily expect to be aware of it, so it doesn't prove anything. I'd be surprised at this stage, given what Kemi Badenoch has said and her, as you've noted, her sort of demeanour about reform. Well, you never know.
Yes, indeed. Do you worry about the pace of her policy? She's pursuing principles, not policies. We're told we may not see policies for a couple of years more. I mean, that gives a political space for Reform to charge ahead.
I mean, I think that's the risk, and that's what's happening. I mean, obviously, you don't need to set down, every detail of policy at the moment. That would make no sense. But equally, I think you need more than, very, very broad principled approach. If you go back to Margaret Thatcher's speeches in the 70s, it's very clear what she stood for. The principles were absolutely clear. The things she wanted to do and where she wanted to take the country was absolutely clear. And I think that's not totally clear from the Conservative Party at the moment.
But she's starting out. I mean, she's an inexperienced leader, no fault of her own. She's been there for a few months now.
I mean, read Margaret Thatcher's speech on being elected as Conservative Party leader. There's a lot of clarity about principle in there that we could do with a bit, I think, if we're going to bring people back to the right.
But you're a very experienced politician, a Conservative politician. Have you ever thought of joining Reform? You're not one of those ones.
I mean, no.
Well, you weren't sure then, you paused.
But, I mean, I didn't spend my life in the Conservative Party. I spent my life as a neutralish diplomat. That's what we did. You had to serve every party. So I haven't spent my life in the Conservative Party. What I'm interested in is proper Conservative policies getting implemented. And let's hope the Conservative Party is the best vehicle for that. But it doesn't have a God-given right to be that vehicle. It's got to earn it, and if somebody else can do it, well, that's how politics will go forward.
That's right. Just finally, David Frost, if you fast forward 4 years, what will it look like? Do you think by then there'll be Reform or Tories in box seat, or there might be a coming together of those two parties?
I mean, it's very difficult to know. There's so many events are going to happen. Who knows? But I would say there must be an understanding, there must be an accommodation, or one or the other party must win out, or we lose again. And both Conservative and Reform have got to keep their minds on that reality over the next year or two.
David Frost, Lord Frost, thank you for joining us on a busy day in Parliament, and back to the Lords to make your speech. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
David Frost, Lord Frost, thank you for joining us on Chopper's Political Podcast. And thank you earlier, of course, to Tom Tugendhat, the former Conservative Security Minister, for joining us too this week. And thank you too for listening wherever you are. I tweet at Christopher Hope on X. Email me, chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed this show, please do tell your friends. If you've really enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, to help other people find it. Thanks to the great team of colleagues at GB News behind the podcast: Mick Booker, Jeff Marsh, Rebecca Nunes and George McMillan. And most importantly of all, thank you again for listening. Please do keep carrying on. If you've got more Chopper in your life, and who doesn't, do catch me during the week on GB News for more political analysis and reporting. And keep up to date with our best reporting on our website too, gbnews.com. Until next time though, cheerio!